Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there and done that with their careers, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas or maybe just comforted knowing that they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times of feeling stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing my longtime friend, Nancy Sullivan. Hello, Nancy.
Hello.
And we are actually in person on her ranch in Watkins, Colorado, out on the deck. So you might hear some roosters and some other wildlife, I guess.
Goats.
But anyway, so Nancy is the Chief Energy Officer, so CEO of Transition Points, LLC. And I'm very excited to hear about that. And I also think it's going to be so important for listeners because obviously listeners who are in transition, this is going to be access to someone who has been in the transition space as a coach for years. So This is quite the benefit.
A lot of years.
A lot of years. Yeah. We won't make you reveal.
Okay,
well, I might.
It doesn't matter.
But before we get into what you're doing today, I always like to start with the icebreaker question. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up, kind of the part of the country, how many siblings, where you are in the birth order, and how that kind of shaped you as a young person into adult.
I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and right in the heart of the Midwest. And I was one of 6 children, the second to the youngest, actually. And it gives you a will to survive.
Ah, I love that.
When you have five other siblings around you all the time. So I think it gave me a will to survive and also taught me a lot about so many different other personalities before I even left home.
Oh, yeah, it would.
Yeah.
So what's the mix of gender between all of you?
1 boy and 5 girls.
5 girls. And where was the boy in the birth order?
He was the second to the oldest.
Okay, so at the beginning.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
And what's the age range? Were you spread out or really close?
Let me think. Well, my oldest sister is 10 years older than I am, and my youngest sister is 4 years younger. So I guess that's 14 years.
Yeah.
Right? Over 14. Can you imagine being
so
pregnant
6
that many
and yeah.
times in that many
Oh
years?
no, I can't. Well, I don't have any
I
children,
just
so.
kill myself.
But of course, you have a large family yourself, so.
We have 6 between us. Yeah. Well, 7. If you count, because my goddaughter is an official member of the family and her wife. So we have a ton of people and 10 grandchildren. And so we have people everywhere.
Yeah. And did your husband grow up with a big family too then?
No, that was just he and his sister.
Oh. So
Very
this
small.
has been a bit of an adaptation for him.
Oh, heck yeah.
Not so much for you. This is normal for you, but.
Yeah.
So as a young person, did you play sports? Were you into music, acting? What were your hobbies and activities?
I was not necessarily into sports so much, although I was on teams, but I was really mostly there because there were human beings there. So I was more into people. And anything I could do to be around people, I would do. And they tried to get me to play the flute once. That didn't go well. So, so we stopped that. So I wasn't into playing music, but I was a cheerleader, and mainly because I was around people and I liked people, and that was the best way to be around people.
Well, you're high energy, so I could see that would fit for you as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it was fun. I went to a Catholic school until I was in 8th grade, and so that certainly shapes you a bit.
Yeah. Was it all girls, or was it?
No, because it was elementary school, so it was boys and girls.
Boys and girls, okay.
Yeah, but you learn interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kept getting thrown out, though, let's see, when we were making our first confession, I got thrown out of that because I was talking too much.
But wasn't that the point?
Yeah, I had something to confess about. But yeah, I was talking to all the other kids in line.
Oh, I see. So you were
problem.
thrown out even before you got...
Well, before I even got to the confessional. And they did tell me, now you really have something to confess about. Oh, yeah, right. Okay, good then. We're good.
So I'm guessing you extrovert on the... I shouldn't have to get... I know. You're extrovert on the...
I am. I am, yes.
On the far end of that scale.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. That is absolutely where I get my energy. It's people.
It's from people.
Always. Yeah.
Okay, we'll shift gears on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 being life of the party. Where do you put yourself?
I'm going to put myself a lot closer to the 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been the tough thing about these times lately with COVID and everything is you don't have that person-to-person interaction.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge for those of us who are extroverted. So we make it up with Zoom as best we can. And you talk the ear off of the person who's 6 feet away from you in the grocery line.
Through your mask.
Through your mask, yes, absolutely.
And they can't understand you, but...
That's right. No one understands, so everybody just laughs and nods.
Yeah,
It's
or
all
see
good.
facial expressions. I was standing there listening to someone and I was smiling.
Yeah.
But I'm like, they can't see that I'm smiling. Do my eyes show that I'm smiling? I hope they
I
do.
know.
So, yeah, it's kinda odd.
And then some people, I never noticed their eyes before until that's all I can see, and beautiful eyes.
Yeah.
So it's been a learning experience for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people are built for social distancing. That's my husband. He's an introvert.
Mine too.
And me, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah, my husband said, it's about time the rest of you people figured this out. Alrighty then.
Okay. Shifting gears again on the risk meter, 1 to 5. Where would you put yourself?
Totally a 5.
Totally 5.
I don't have a good risk inhibitor. That is not in my DNA.
Oh, okay.
So.
And was it always that way, even as a young person? And
Yes.
the same for professional and kind of personal? Like, would you do... A lot of people throw out, well, I would never skydive. Or I'd totally have skydived already. I mean, do you...
Yeah, I haven't skydived, except indoor skydiving with 2 of my granddaughters. But yeah, I never think about, if it feels right to do something, then you just do it. And people would ask you, well, didn't you worry about this or that? And no, it never even occurred to me.
Those thoughts don't come into your mind, but other people, those thoughts are, at the forefront. So.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they have to worry through everything first, and that would be my husband, who plans for the worst, and then you can enjoy the best. And I always say, why waste all that time worrying?
Just
never going to happen anyway.
It's going to be the best, right? No matter what.
It always is the best, yeah. So yeah, I don't worry about things much. Very rarely.
Okay, well, I love those 2 questions because they tend to show up as we go through your story and show up over and over. So it's pretty cool. So
yeah.
So let's get into what you're doing today, and then we'll get into how did I get here. So tell us about being the Chief Energy Officer at Transition Points LLC.
So now what I do is I'm in the process of writing my 2nd adult book. I have a children's book too, but so that's part of it, is I'm an author. And my favorite thing to do is to be on a stage with any number of people, 2 or 10 or 5,000. Makes no difference to me. It's all good.
You can connect with all of them, right?
Exactly, yeah. One at a time, preferably. And so public speaking, doing facilitations, and team and executive coaching. So I've been a coach through one of my later jobs. I was certified as an executive coach. So I also do coaching. And I've done a lot of that through the COVID thing because a lot of people are having challenges with it. And because my specialty is transition, that's what my first book is on, and that's what I do. That's what I know. So that's a whole different experience. Not part of my jobs, but something that I did to learn that. So that's where I am today.
Fascinating. Well, I've seen you on stage, and we've talked when I was going through transition, so
Yeah.
I know the value that you always can bring,
Yeah.
and I just know your history, so we'll get into that. So let's go back to, again, when you were growing up, junior high school, did you always want to be kind of on stage and a coach and all of that, or what did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't know what I wanted to be. I went through different stages of wanting to be a nun in the Congo. That was one of my earliest recollections.
Not a lot of people to talk to there.
Yeah, not a lot. Yeah. So that did not work out well. But I didn't know what I wanted to be, but the very first time that I had to do a speech was in second grade, and I had to do a speech on Pancho Villa, and I fell in love with it. I thought, wow, this is the best thing I've ever done. It was so fun. And
so it was the process of preparing for it and getting up and
talking to people about it and explaining about this wild character and how cool he was in a really dark way. But it was energizing, totally energizing. That's the one thing I knew right away, that's where I wanted to be. I could spend all my life there.
Which actually could cover a number of things, right? I mean, it could be a nun in the Congo, I guess.
Yeah,
it could be a teacher. It could be a leader, or a variety of things. So I can see how that wouldn't help narrow necessarily at the time, but at least. And of course, it's second grade. I'm amazed that you can remember something from second grade like that.
Yeah, it was a striking experience for sure.
A pivotal moment in the second grade.
Yeah, probably for everyone.
That other kids went home and went, "Oh, you should have seen the speaker today."
Yeah, she would never stop. But it was fun, and it's interesting that you asked that question, because one of the things I did later in my life was I was an adjunct professor at University of Denver, and I taught career management for women. And in that class, I brought in CEOs and professional people from all kinds of industries to share with the students what they looked for and what their experience was like getting where they were. And it was interesting because on the CEO level, I brought in 14 CEOs, one every week. And out of that 14, 12 of them were what I would call opportunistic. They had no idea they wanted to be a CEO. Not a clue that that's what they wanted. But as they went back and talked about their experiences, every time an opportunity would open up that looked good, they would just go with it, not knowing really where it would end up. Out of that 12, there were a couple who said, well, I kind of had a plan, and it was really more about just wanting to control the world and have a lot of money.
That was their plan.
That was the plan, yeah. So each step that got them closer, that's where they went. But the only people I have found that really know what they want to be and have this drive are what I would call vocational people. There are people who know that they want to be a minister, or they know they want to be a doctor, or they know they want to be a fireman or a policeman or whatever it is. Those kinds of vocations seem to attract, they seem to be a singular focus, like that's my purpose, is to do this, or being a teacher. And everybody else seems to be more opportunistic, except for this little tiny sliver of people that I call directed. And they're the people who had no choice what they got to do. They either had to run the family business, or because they were so good at math, you have to be a CPA or an accountant. And they never really thought about it. They never really thought about the choice. That's what they were groomed to be their whole life. And the sad part is in transition when I was later at LHH, many of those people were miserable in their careers. They never wanted to be that, but they thought they had no choice.
Yeah. And then they get into it and then start earning a living and having some probably levels of success to then financially they're kind of...
They think they're stuck.
Yeah.
What else? I don't know how to do anything else.
Yeah.
So not true. But yeah, so I was in that group that was opportunistic, not with a big plan, because I'm not known for planning, actually. But things would just come my way, and if it felt good, I call it a knowing. You just have a knowing that this will be good, I'm going here.
And then you don't have the worry gene, so you're like, oh, and then what good can come out of this? I mean, so it sounds like that's how you approach things, and then all kinds of good comes out of it.
Yeah, this will be awesome. This is a fabulous opportunity. COVID, what a fabulous opportunity.
I got to tell you, I tend to be in the camp of having those worry genes, and I didn't realize they were worry genes until just recently. And I'm like, crap, what is up with the worry genes?
No kidding.
And so I've... And I think before I thought it was more I just had that critic. Yeah, that little voice that was a critic. So, but I really admire that you don't have those, because once the thought hits you as a worrier, then of course you kind of go down this path, or you feel like you have to. But that's one thing I really backed off. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm not going down that path. So let's just thank you for bringing up the point. Let's move over here. And so I'm going to start using your philosophy of what good can come out of this.
That's right. It'll be fun.
So in high school then, and then did you go to college?
I did. And in fact, I got my bachelor's degree at the University of Arizona. And not surprising, I changed my major 7 times while I was going to the university. And finally, I went to my advisor and said, okay, I got to get out of here. I'm pretty done with college. What can I get my degree in the
what
fastest?
What does all of this get me?
with the best possible grade average. And he looked at my stuff and he said, public speaking. And I said, what a surprise. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, then.
And were you like, I didn't know they had a degree in that.
I really didn't.
I didn't know they did either.
No.
I thought that was more of a skill set, not a discipline or a degreed program.
Right. You could take electives. Well,
wow. So had you known that going in, do you think you would have taken it?
Maybe. Yeah.
Well, based on the second grade Pancho Villa.
I know, one would think. Yeah. So I said, that is fabulous. This is where I'm going. So I graduated with high honors because my major field was so high because that's all I wanted to do anyway. So it was a blast. And then I went on to get my MBA and at Arizona State, and I also went to Smith College and got a certificate in leadership and management from Smith College back in Northampton. So.
And was all of this like right out of high school in your 20s, or was there
when let's see, I had my bachelor's degree when I was hired into my first big job, and that was at Mountain Bell way back then. And I came in on what they called the Jockey Program.
Jet Jockey Program. What a cool name.
Yeah, well, that was mostly from the people who hated it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we were jet jockeys.
So it was a negative connotation.
Kind of was, yeah. But we were hired right out of college, and the idea was they would literally airdrop you into jobs, and the rule was you could have no training for any job that you were in. You had to be able to drop down wherever they placed you, pick it up, and you were managing people because we went right in as managers as well as supervisors at that time. And the idea was you will sink or swim. You are in or you're out. And if you can't figure out how to get this done without knowing what the job is, you're out. And
wow, that's an immense amount of pressure.
Oh, yeah. Well, for most people it was. I didn't think about it because it was...
Because, again, you don't have the worry gene.
Yeah, I really didn't. And so I went into it, and the first thing I would always do is look for the people who I really enjoyed. Because the biggest thing I learned in going through that kind of a process was first you have to trust people to teach you. Because you can't trust a book because you're not going to get any. You're not going to get any training. So you had to trust the people who knew what they were doing to teach you. And you also had to learn how to get things done with people. Because, here I was, a 5-foot little blonde bouncing out of college, working with these guys in network operations who were 6'5", been there for 30 years. My favorite was Monty, who chewed tobacco and spit in a platoon in meetings.
Because you could do that back then.
You could do that.
Yeah, you could smoke, you could spit.
Yeah.
Ew.
Oh, yeah, kind of gross.
Mm-hmm.
But really effective, actually, because there was a guy once who really didn't like me because I was a jet jockey and really did his best at every meeting to make me look horrible. And so there was one meeting when I told Monty, I said, here's what you need to do. I'm going to be at the front of the room talking. Ken is going to try to kill me. So we did it all the time. I want you to sit right to Ken's left so that he has to look at you before he can see me to the front of the room. And I want you to chew like you never chewed before, and I want you to spit, and I want you to put that spittoon right over there in front of Ken. Close as you can get it. And he said, all right. And that's exactly what he did. And I've never seen someone be completely green. And Ken started out by trying to sabotage me and my team.
Mm-hmm.
Completely lost it. He was could not speak. He was so grossed out. It was perfect. It was beautiful. It worked out.
Strategy worked great.
It did. And, Monty got to do what he'd always wanted to do. Yeah, and I wasn't being mean. I didn't stop him from speaking. It was just, a way of getting his attention elsewhere.
Yeah, distracting him. And
because he wasn't helpful, really.
No.
So, no. That was my theory. So.
Well, interesting that you get dropped into that, because my first thought would be, well, I should know a lot of this, but then it's like, well, how could I know this? So you're absolutely right. You got to trust the people on as you're dropped into. Like most leaders are kind of step into something new. Yeah. You got to figure out who to trust, right? And who's got the right competency and expertise.
And what do I need to know? Mm-hmm. And the best people to ask are the people who are already doing it. And if you go in with the attitude that I'm just going to... I don't know anything. Mm-hmm. I know nothing. I know nothing, which was not a surprise to them. And say, please help me, if you could. Just help me. And they did. 9 out of 10 of them were unbelievably kind, extremely patient. And I had gratitude. I was so grateful to them for sharing what took them 30 years to learn.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, they kept me out of trouble. The whole time, always kept me out of trouble, and it was fabulous.
Well, and many times they appreciate the role that you're doing and how you're, I don't want to use the word protecting, but how you're, working within the job you have to do, the jobs they have to do.
Yeah.
And many times they don't want your job.
Most of them didn't.
And so they value that, okay, well, if she can be successful, then maybe we can be successful. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
And they knew I had their back too. And that's how I always approached it. That was one of the most important things for me.
Yeah. So you showed up authentic, genuine, trusting them, and expected the same in return. And most time got it, except from Ken.
Except from Ken. Yeah, he did not like me, but that's all right. It's okay. We actually ended up to be good friends.
Oh, did you?
Yes,
okay.
After the spittoon incident, we ended up being good friends. So, but it was terrific, and it was a really good way for me to learn. And I did see others in my program. Out of my program, the year we went in, there were only 3 of us that survived. And that was out of 24, I think.
Wow, that's a low survival. So did they ever rethink that program and go, maybe there's another way to...
Their thought was, we are bringing these people in to be the leaders of the company. And they have to learn how to survive without training. They have to learn to think on their feet. Mm-hmm. And they have to be liked. They have to get along with the people, and if they can't do it, they don't belong here. They can go somewhere else. Well, they'll train them to be whatever it is, but not us.
Yeah.
But I loved it. But I did watch some of my friends who it was horrible for them. Just they hated it. So they didn't deal well with ambiguity, and it just didn't bother me.
Yeah.
It was all good, and it did just get better.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
So where did you go from there then?
So I started out as a supervisor in the customer service center, like the call center. Mm-hmm. And then the other theory was, let's move them around every 6 months. So they have to learn, we want them to be generalists. So I had network operations, I had engineering, everything but marketing. And one of my favorite roles towards the end of my 19 years there was my favorite, and the thing I'm most proud of is I got selected to lead Telechoice, which was the very first cable system started by any one of the Bell companies. And in Telechoice, we actually teamed up with AT&T and MCI at the time, and we did the very first real market trial, literally in people's homes, of video on demand.
What? And, okay, so I do have to date you now. What year was this?
That was probably 1989, maybe.
And you're doing video on demand, because we didn't get that until...
Literally, we had banks of VCRs in the basement of our office, and we had people there 24 hours a day. You would pick up the phone, call them, and say, I want to watch, Top Gun. And they would literally run over and get that VCR and put it in to the bank of VCRs and then run it for you. So it was not a technology trial.
So they would run it right to that one home.
Right to that
they
one
could
home.
do it to that
yes,
one
they could
home.
do one home, yeah. So we had to build the system first, and AT&T and MCI were really instrumental about that. It wasn't MCI, it was TCI. Really instrumental, and that's where I met Colleen Abdullah, who, I don't know if you've interviewed Colleen, but...
No, she's on my list.
Amazing person, absolutely amazing, and just a blast.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the cool thing was it was only a market trial. It was to see how people would behave if they liked having videos on demand. But also we set price points that are still the same ones they use today. So it's been validated.
You're kidding. So that's what, 30 years later?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Wow.
Yep. And I think we started it in 89. I think we completed it in probably 1994, I think. Maybe.
So where did it go from there then? I mean, sometimes, so a trial, beginning and end, or beginning, end, and then goes into, live.
Then from there, the cable system itself was in Kansas City, Nebraska. And so it stayed there. It's still there now, although it has been bought and sold several times since then. So the cable system was still there, and the on-demand was still there until everything got replaced with the new fiber and then, but from there, it took a few years before anybody could offer it in a way that was sustainable, because VCRs and
scalable, sustainable,
that was never going to work long term. And so it took probably, 8-10 years before it was really able to be launched in reality. And so from there, telechoice doesn't exist anymore because it was bought. It was such a tiny area that we had. It wouldn't have been viable as its own franchise. So it was just bought by, I don't know who, but people remember the name still in Kansas City, and occasionally we'll see things on YouTube or in different posts where they'll mention telechoice. So it's fun.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
Well, I can see how your risk-taking, abilities and what good can come out of this would really fit in a new product launch like that, or a new trial. Yeah. I mean, that's because it was all about, well, what are we going to learn from this? Not necessarily is it going to be successful, or being worried about success as much as what are we going to learn, probably.
And I didn't know anything about cable. I didn't know anything about video on demand. I didn't know anything about marketing, which followed the same path that at that time US West then, because they had, I think, morphed into that. I never knew anything about the jobs that I was taking. That actually has been a consistent theme in my whole career as I think about it.
So you haven't had the technical expertise, and not technical from technology, but just the discipline or whatever it was that you were...
Yeah, it was always about learning. Even after I left US West, I worked in a few .coms and helped them do their customer care, and I don't know anything about .coms either.
But you knew about customer care.
I did know about customer care. Yes, I did. And that's when I worked with William Bridges and started to learn transitions, and got certified as a transition coach. That was before I went to LHH. And then I went to Lee Hecht Harrison, started as a business developer. Never sold anything in my whole life. But and then from there I became enamored with leadership. So I became a regional leadership specialist and then a general manager for Colorado, and ended up as one of the talent development directors for the Midwest region. And during that process, that's when I got certified as an executive coach too, and got to travel all over the world working with different clients. It was super fun, and I learned a lot. I never knew anything about management before that, or leadership, or...
But you were doing it.
Yeah, you kind of do it.
But it's different than to be the coach of that versus, and step out of it and really study it versus being in it.
Yeah, it was really a different experience, and so I'm grateful for everything that I learned, and new ways of doing it, transformation, workforce transformation, and all kinds about resilience, and it's incredible. It's a really good experience.
So you talked a little bit about your first book, Transition Points. So tell us what kind of inspired you then to become an author. I'm learning over these years, an author is such a isolated experience many times, right? You're sitting, you're getting all your thoughts together. You being such an extroverted person, many times, that author and they don't go together.
Yeah. Well, my book is called Transition Points, and it started actually because my little sister came to live with us after she got divorced and brought her 3 children, her cat, and her dog to live with us in a house that we were renovating. So it was a wild time.
Yeah.
Wild time. But about halfway into it, she was miserable because she didn't know what she wanted. So I said, we'll do a support group. So I brought together 8 women. And Alice, a good friend of mine, and I facilitated these 8 women. And we started out by asking, what's one thing you want to change in your life? Just one thing. And everybody came up with something. My sister wanted to get married again. So that was her thing.
It wasn't about career. It was...
No. Yeah, and these 8 women had really divergent areas. Some were financial, some were relationships, some were health. And as we went through this 1 year, at the conclusion of 1 year, every single one of those 8 women had gotten what they wanted. They had created the change they wanted. And it caused me to ask, what is it with these 8 people who were successful at going through a significant change in their lives, including my sister, who at the end was engaged and has now been married for 10 years, I think. I don't know how long, a long time. And how did they do this when so many people going through change are crushed? They're victimized by it. It's a horrible experience. What's the difference? And that's when I set out to do interviews with people. And what started out to be very similar to what you're doing, but asking the question, tell me the most significant change you've ever been through in your life, what happened, and what's been the outcome of that? And pretty soon people were referring people to me from all over the world. And so luckily I was recording them, though, on little cassette recorders.
Oh, because that was the technology at the time.
Yeah, that's right. And so I started collecting all these interviews and it got to the point, after about the first maybe 20, I could tell within 5 minutes if this was a person who was a victor of change or a victim of change. It was so easy just by the languaging they used and the focus they had. And that also made me understand that being resilient about change is not something that you are just born with necessarily, although some people are. Anybody can learn it. It is nothing but a skill set. It's a muscle that needs to be worked. And there are ways of doing it that are not hard. So my book was really, although not based on those specific ones, because it's much more about career, took a lot of what I learned there and also what I was learning as a coach for Lee Hecht Harrison with all of those people going through transition to understand, how can you do it better? How can you get through this and feel really good about it? And that's what that book is about, is really taking what I think are the 2 most important components, which is passion for what you're doing and skill. And once you combine those 2, you are in a nirvana space. You are in the flow, literally. You will be inspired. It is easy. You love it.
You're unstoppable.
You are unstoppable. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And so that's what the whole book is about. And I would facilitate sessions all the time on how to do that for people in transition. And it was great fun. So the authoring part was really not so hard because it was easy to just pull from all the presentations I'd done.
Because you've already organized it with,
Exactly.
Okay, with all your speaking. Okay.
I had spoken the book.
And so you already had the
1,000
energy
times.
about all the
Yeah.
content. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times people, that's their first time of getting their content kind of out of their heads and in a way that others may benefit from it.
That seems painful.
Yeah.
That might take a really long time. Yeah. So that's how it came to be. And since then now I'm working on the next book, which is much more about more significant life changes and transitions. the things that cause people heartache sometimes, but also cause people to become new people and to regenerate. And the most important thing that I've learned through all of this is you need to have fun and you need to have energy about life. If you're at a place where, it's like what I say, if you're not who, what, or where you want to be, you are at a transition point, like it or not. And my idea is make the transition now. As part of what I found through all this research and through all the interviews is to me, the universe, whatever anybody wants to call it, fate, the universe, God, I don't care what they call it, your scales have to be balanced. That's when we're good, is when our scales are balanced. The life is fabulous. When your scales become unbalanced and something's not quite right, it's like that beautiful shirt that you got 5 years ago, but now it doesn't fit so well anymore, right? When you become unbalanced, the universe wants to bring those back into balance. They want you to be balanced and happy and passionate and energetic. So when they are out of balance, the idea is you can either pull your own trigger and make something happen, or you can wait, and the universe will pull it for you without a shadow of a doubt. I've watched it happen thousands of times. And so the idea is take control of it and you be in charge. And sometimes that's really scary because you're comfortable even though you might be miserable. And it's really scary. And so now this is much more about how do I get myself back into a place where I know I'm balanced, where I'm happy, where I feel good about what I'm doing. I'm fulfilled. I'm energized by it. Whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
And the point is that you can easily do that. You can take control, and like you said, you can make a choice. When you wake up and it's a scary day or something that you're worried about, and I do get those voices now and again, but I have a high level of understanding that I can choose to be miserable or I can choose not to be.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And that's what you kind of said too. And it's getting to that point of recognizing how much control you really have. So that's probably kind of one of the center points of the work that I do, is figuring out, and transition isn't just about careers. It is literally any time that you are someplace but you would rather be here. Whatever that is, makes no difference.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, is get there then. Let's get there. And how do I do it? How do I build my bridge from where I am to where I want to be? And what I love is once people figure out the skill set, life is different. Life is beautiful. And all of a sudden they're having fun. And they got past the fear. And they were not destroyed by it. And they're living a life that they never thought they could live.
Yeah.
They just didn't think they could do it. But voila. It's awesome. It's all good, and it just gets better.
So you got to do this in your life's work, being a transition coach, and then now you're writing about it.
Yeah.
I have to ask, did you ever have any times when you were stuck? I've been using the word setback, and I realized I don't know if I like setback because, again, that's one of those mindset things, right? That you think, oh, I had setbacks, and really they're learning opportunities, but sometimes it's just you're feeling stuck.
There was a time in my life a few years ago. My whole life has gone by in a way that I never really thought about it. I never had to think about what I was going to do. Like I said, I don't plan anything. And what I know now is I always felt guided. I always had what I have always called a knowing. Just not even thinking about a possible risk to it or a downside, but saying, yeah, this is good. This is where I will go now, and following that path. There was a time in my life when I began to question things, and because people would say, your life can't be that easy. It can't be that easy. And so
you're like, but it is.
Yeah.
But then you started.
Honestly, I started saying, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I should be doing all this planning. Maybe I should be worrying about the stuff that everyone's worried about. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And it was a miserable couple of years because I was uncertain about so many things, coming from that shadow of a doubt and the questioning of my own guidance. And it took, I started to meditate, and which I never thought I could do. I always tell you I was one of the people that said, I just can't shut my brain off. I can't quiet down enough to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true.
Yeah, well, I don't know that anyone can.
I know, yeah.
That's what you kind of learn once you start doing it, or learn from others, like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
They're bouncing around up there, too.
Guess what? Yeah, it's all good. That is meditating.
Or wait, they're asleep. No,
yeah, it could be that, too, absolutely. And so as I started to meditate, some things started to come up for me, and a recognition of who I really was. And it took me back to understanding the guidance that was there comes from a space that I have that's deeper than a lot of people, but only because I had to seek it out again for the second time. I had it, I lost it, and I had to go find it again.
And you had it maybe before as an innate, unconscious maybe thing, but now would you say it's more conscious because you had to find it again?
Yes, it is absolutely
more of an awareness.
More conscious. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When, in fact, this goes way back to, you've heard of people who have near-death experiences and their life is like completely changed, which is true. Well, when I was born, I was baptized within the first 5 or 6 minutes, and then given last rites because they said she's not going to make it, she's dying. Because I was an RH baby, and that was before they knew how to deal with RH, and 98% of the babies born with it died. Well, and so I was dying, and they did a complete blood transfusion. It's where they have a big scar right here and one on my ankle. And they took out all my blood and replaced it with new blood. And then I made it. So I lived, right? Now, I thought everyone had these scars. I thought that's how you were made. Oh. And I do remember my mom telling me when I was probably 6 or so, no, you had a full blood transfusion. You were dying. They thought you were gone.
Wow.
And so that all to say that I probably had an unconscious awareness of it even way back then. Because I think the moment that all of us get born, I believe you sort of start losing your connection to wherever you came from, right? If you have any spiritual sense of it, you start living outside of yourself, right? Because you have to make connections with your family and life, and so we get focused on the outside, and we kind of lose a groundedness, right?
Yeah.
A knowing, I think, whatever people want to call that. And so we're all kind of born dying. It wasn't just me, as we all were. And I think as you go through life, most people will say that they begin as they are, as you grow up, you start also looking inward. So maybe you get to a point where you don't as much live your life based on the outside as you also look inside. And you become a little more introspective. I don't know if you've had that kind of a sense where you try to figure out the why of things.
Yeah.
And where'd that come from? And how come? And as you begin to do that, I think you kind of reground yourself. And that's the knowing to me. I don't know what other people would call it, but it's a knowing that you have. And when you follow that, it just doesn't go wrong. There's no wrong. It always works out.
Yeah.
Even though it might be challenging, sometimes you might go through a period where you say, well, this doesn't seem to be that good at the moment, but okay then. And then it all works out.
Yeah. And sometimes then you look back and you go, well, no, that was totally the right choice. Didn't know at the time. So would you say that's that whole concept of trusting your gut?
Yes, absolutely is. Yeah.
As I found through these interviews that people have regrets when they haven't trusted their gut. It wasn't really the decision they made. It was really whether or not they trusted themselves.
Yeah.
And when they trust themselves, then it does tend to work out because you make it work out because you're trusting yourself. But when you, I think, have that doubt and you don't, because how many times you've said, oh, I should have trusted my gut on that. I had, it's like that. I hired that employee and they seemed so great, but I just thought there was something not right. And then it reveals itself.
It does.
At some point.
Yeah. I just had a feeling. I hear that from people all the time. And it's being aware enough of that and understanding the significance of it.
Yeah.
And saying it's okay. You know, the work they've done at the Heart Math Institute, for example, where they talk about your heart responds to experience before your brain ever figures out there was an experience. And that's nothing more than scientific data. They've done experiments where they will show a scary picture and a loving picture to a human being, and they have monitors on their brain and also on their heart. The heart will register to the scary one before the brain picks up on what it is. So the brain, it's like, whoa, wow, that's horrible.
Yeah. Right? And we're probably talking milliseconds.
It is milliseconds, yeah. But it's fascinating research. But that is kind of that trust your gut, even though it's your heart. I don't know, your heart, your gut, whatever. But
your knowing, like you call it your knowing versus your gut.
Knowing. Yeah. And leaders that I've talked to over the years and that I've known, there's not one, I think, that's been truly successful. And I mean, not just financially successful and position-wise, but also who are satisfied whole human beings, you know, who value life and who value people. Every single one of them will trust their gut, always. And it's beautiful, but it's a muscle, right?
Yeah.
You gotta learn to trust it. And
I was gonna say, those are the ones that you usually keep in your circle. Long after you may not be in that same circle. That you come back to.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're the people that you trust.
And you learn from, and they're probably the ones you call mentors.
Yes.
Because and also those people are. Now I'm kind of building on this. Are the ones who share then also why, and they maybe don't have a rationale any more than, well, I'm trusting my gut on this.
Yes.
But here's the other data points I've used, or the other input or data, information.
And that's the cool part, is once you have that knowing and you trust your gut, the way is shown to you. I mean, the doors open up. The points that you need to connect all just show up, and it's like magic. And it happens over and over again, which I think gives them a track record of understanding how valuable their gut really is. And so they stop questioning it.
Yeah.
Right? And
because their data points keep reflecting,
exactly.
Look, it worked, which is why you were like, my life is easy. And then people started planting the seeds of doubt, and you're like, what? It's not.
It's impossible. It's crazy. And everybody has their way of getting there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing, though, that you did have that period of time where you were doubting that. Because sometimes, this is one of the reasons I like doing the podcast, is from the outside, leaders look, flawless many times, or they got it all figured out, and it's easy. And there's a lot going on behind the scenes that you don't get to see until you start talking to them, which is what we've learned in our women's leadership groups and the mentoring circles we've been part of and things like that. Is once you start talking to people and you're learning, oh, well, wait a minute, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm doing the best I can. She's doing the best she can. And
exactly right. And the funny part is because everything lines up for them, people look at the physical evidence and they say, well, no, he's very scientific about it. They're very analytical about it. Well, it started someplace else. They knew what to do, and then they did the right steps, because if you keep following the knowing, it takes you right where you need to go.
Yeah.
So, but it looks really good on the outside. But those are the best leaders I've ever worked with or known, and I've stayed in connection with as well. So
I guess there's an air of confidence as well, because again, I'm following the knowing, and I know that I've succeeded in this path before, or that succeeded in, it's going to open up for us. We're going to figure it out. We're going to get there.
Yeah.
So it's not that it's the same path each time.
Oh, no.
It's that it's the trusting of we'll figure out the right path.
Yes. Yeah. And they tend to also be the leaders that people trust, because they know that they are cared about at some level, and they take their relationship with people seriously too. And now to that point, sometimes their gut will tell them, like you mentioned, not to hire that person. Something's not quite right. That's not a very scientific thing, but...
No, and can be frustrating if you're the one that interviewed them and you think they're the best candidate ever.
Yeah.
And you've got the gap on your team and you need that person.
Yeah, and they say, yeah, not so
Not
much.
so much.
Not here. Yeah. It's an amazing thing, though. And as you mentioned this, but as you've been doing all the interviews, have you found that most of the people have a tendency to come back to a sense of gut or knowing? Or do they have different processes, I guess?
Yeah, I would say that what I'm finding is that people are finding their way. So your 3 categories that you brought up at the beginning about the opportunistic and directed, or that I knew. I just knew I wanted to be a doctor or whatever. Has been, it's been spot on. So I think that's so cool to have those 3 categories. It's I think when something happens outside your control, like I was invited to leave my job.
Yes.
Like you said, the universe will balance something out. The interview I just posted today, she talked about it. I was invited to leave. And she said, I actually started laughing when my boss was telling me this because I realized I had been putting out all of these messages and signs and saying things because I was so unhappy. And yet I was so surprised. She said it was the weirdest thing to kind of have this inner knowing that it wasn't right for me, and yet this surprise of I can't believe you're letting me.
Yeah. Yes.
So
it's amazing.
But yeah, I do think there's an inner knowing there. There's also that I went down this path because I was told I was good at this, and then I got in and went, this is not me. And then this knowing of, I want to work with animals, or I want to work with it more creative, or so yeah, I think. But until you experience it many times, I don't think you get. Maybe that helps you with your data points or with the knowing to say, you know what, I went down this, mom and dad encouraged me, teacher so-and-so encouraged me, and now I'm here and going, this just doesn't feel right. And now I've got to have that hard conversation with mom and dad or whoever about this, what do I really want? And by the way, I've kind of been telling you that's what I want, but maybe you haven't been listening.
That's right, yeah. Or that you hear well, that's not a serious career.
Oh, yeah. And how are you going to make money?
That's a good one.
How is it? Are you going to earn a living? Yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, I do think there's a knowing, but it does take an awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. And allowing yourself to be aware, which is that introspection of kind of putting the pieces together and saying, ooh, yeah, this works every time. Well, there must be something there.
Yeah.
One of the... along this path of transition and things working out, when I was between leaving US West and joining LHH, I was doing all these interviews, and so I really wanted to go on a cruise. And so I contacted Royal Caribbean and said, so here's the deal, I'm writing a book, and I want to interview people about the biggest change they've ever been through because I'm writing a book. And they said, oh, fabulous. So they paid for my cruise.
What?
And yeah, I got this fabulous stateroom, and they set up a conference room for me, and it was fabulous. They did everything for me because I was sort of like, when you're at an at-sea day, I was something to do, right?
Oh.
You could schedule interviews with me.
Okay.
Right. So, but one of the couples that I interviewed was fabulous because they were not happy where they were. He was a divorce attorney, and she was a realtor. And they lived in California, and they said, we want to make a change, but there's no way. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And they said, we want to cruise at least half the year. We'd love to cruise, and we want to live in Hawaii. And I said, so what's stopping you? Well, we have to make money. I said, okay, all right. So I said, well, what do you know, as talking to the lawyer, what do you know that you think people would love to know? And he'd say, probably how not to end up in divorce court. I said, probably, yeah. And so he started talking about all the stories he had and the things he'd learned about this would have saved this marriage. He knew a lot of stuff. She was Japanese, And so I said, well, what do you love doing? And she had a love for the history of the tea ceremonies in Japan. And I said, wow, what a beautiful thing. No one knows about those. That's lost. And so I said, so what could you do with that, perhaps? Well, so I kept in contact with them over the next year. And I got this beautiful email from them. They were now on their second, no, it was 2 years later. They were on their second 6-month cruise where he would lead seminars on how to stay out of divorce court, right? So he would schedule those, and she was teaching people the Japanese tea ceremonies. And the cruise lines loved it because, again, they were the at-sea entertainment, right? And the guy was funny anyway. And they had moved to Hawaii. So the other 6 months they lived in Hawaii. He went back to his law, like he did his law thing 6 months out of the year. She did her real estate thing in Hawaii. And then the other 6 months out of the year, he operated on a cruise ship and did seminars. It just shows if you know what it is that you want, you are capable of creating change in your life. There's absolutely no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's occurring for me is this notion of when you said passion and skill, that once you kind of do tap into that passion, or I guess it just in some cases, just make the decision, I'm going to do X, then the way shows itself. And you're no longer in indecision, or you're no longer in transition, I guess, because you're like, I'm going to do X. And that's when I found in my life things just start to snowball or roll. Like when I decided to start my own business, I'd been kind of going back, well, I'm kind of sort of thinking about, and again, I was getting if you want to earn money, I get that that's creative and that's really fun. But if you only earn money, you can't possibly. And then once I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I just made that statement. I think I said it out loud. I said it to my husband. He's like, oh, good for you. And then like within 2 days, someone who I really respected found this business coach about how to launch a business. And it was a freedom and luxurious lifestyle business coach and freedom and luxurious lifestyle designer. And because this person was so credible for me, I'm like, well, he wouldn't have brought this up if she wasn't legit. Yeah. And then right away, I decided to hire her. By the way, I interviewed her already. Her name's Erica Duran.
Oh, is that right? I have to look her up.
Because I felt like that was such a great experience for me. And within 90 days, I had a business launched. Now, I could have got in my own way, like I usually did, which is I need a year to start a business. But I'm like, no, I'm just going to trust this. And I went down the path with her. So anyway, that's kind of how I'm equating to what you're saying is that, once I made that decision, then it was very obvious what I was going to do. Yeah. It's when I think I'm stuck when I am in that place of indecision. Yeah. And then once you just make a decision, right or wrong. And by the way, would you say you've ever made a wrong decision? I asked this at a happy hour one night because I thought, most people, once you make the decision, you figure out a way. And then you don't ever say, oh, that was such a bad decision. It's usually, it didn't work out like I wanted, or that got me here. I mean, you can kind of...
I think in retrospect, there have been some where I would have said, ooh, I probably shouldn't have done that. But then as I go back and I figure out what I learned from it, I think, but I wouldn't have learned that if I hadn't done that. Yeah. Right? And some of them are tough lessons. They're not the easy ones.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say we're not perfect. No, I guess I have done some things that I wouldn't be very proud of. And it's not for the podcast. So Nancy, I could talk with you all afternoon. But we probably need to wrap this up. So tell us about what you think was the thing that served you the best over your life or over your career.
I would say first the knowing, follow that knowing, follow your gut. But the other thing I would say that carried me through everything was the people. And learning when I was at Mountain Bell / US West, then Quest, learning that I had to do everything, I had to learn everything from the people, and I had to have them help carry me through it and teach me. I had to depend on them, and I had to work with them. And that by far has carried me through my entire career, because no job I ever walked into did I really have experience for. I didn't have background, I didn't have training. I had people, and those people were kind enough to share with me what they knew, And I have always been so grateful for them, because they taught me everything I needed to know, and they made sure I got through it one way or the other. So absolutely the people.
Well, what a great lesson early in life and as a young leader, right? Because I know I was in that mindset of, I think I was trying to prove myself and that what value I brought versus recognizing and valuing others really would have been far greater than I think how I was trying to have good ideas and right ideas or right approaches. And even the word right now sounds funny, because it's really not about that. It's about how do you kind of move things forward.
Yeah.
So, but it is about trusting those people and creating an environment where they can do their best and help you do your best. And
they're just, then you all own it, and it's so good. Just gets better.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for sharing your story. And listeners, if you enjoyed today's podcast and interview, please subscribe below. And if you have any questions for me or for Nancy about future podcasts, then you can post them on lifestorycurator.com, which is where I'll post this interview, and I'll also post how you can get in touch with Nancy, get her current book, get her new book when it comes out. That'll be very exciting. So I guess on that note, we'll wrap up, and stay safe, stay well, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.